The UK Labour Party's top team has spent today at their big business summit. Labour leader Keir Starmer and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves have been hosting 400 executives at a conference designed to cement them as the party of business. With tickets at £1,000 a head, at the very least, the Labour coffers are £400,000 better off. But funds aren't the only thing being raised. Eyebrows are also being elevated at some of the new pledges being made to business leaders. Rachel Reeves gave her keynote address to the gathered bigwigs today, and she made one particular promise regarding corporation tax.
The next Labour government will make the pro-business choice and the pro-growth choice. We will cap the headline rate of corporation tax at its current rate of 25% for the duration of the next Parliament. And should our competitiveness come under threat, if necessary, we will act. That means that business can plan today investment projects with the confidence of knowing that their returns will be taxed at a certain rate for the rest of this decade.
Yes, that's Rachel Reeves promising that a Labour government will hold corporation tax at 25% for the duration of the next Parliament. Why is it when Labour speaks about funding public services, there's always a caution and the excuse that we can't make promises, we don't know what the financial situation is yet? But when it comes to promising private business things, the pledges are made with the quickness. And an example of this came just minutes later. GB News political editor Christopher Hope asked Reeves if she would raise income tax thresholds. This was her answer.
The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that by 2027-2028, a fifth of Britons will be paying higher rate income tax, one in four teachers, 1 in 8 nurses, because of what's called fiscal drag. As Chancellor, will you lift thresholds to stop this happening?
So the tax burden is now at the highest it's been in 70 years, and under the most recent forecasts, it's set to go up for each of the next 5 years. I've made no secret of the fact that I think that taxes on working people are too high, but I won't make any commitments that are not fully costed and fully funded. And so while I would like taxes on working people to be lower, the most damaging thing you could do is to promise tax cuts that end up crashing financial markets and sending mortgage rates soaring, which is what the Conservatives have done. I will never make that mistake.
So she's saying that Labour have costed for a corporation tax cap, but not to ensure working people aren't dragged into higher tax brackets without real terms take-home pay actually increasing. Those are some interesting priorities. And it's not the only area where Reeves seems keen to further beef big profits for only a few people. The Shadow Chancellor has now said that Labour will not reinstate the cap on bankers' bonuses. The EU introduced the cap in 2014 as a safety measure against further reckless city speculation after the 2008 financial crisis. Kwasi Kwarteng, the Tory Chancellor who survived only 38 days after nearly causing a run on the Bank of England, pledged to remove the cap. Last October, Rishi Sunak had followed through on lifting it. And back then, Rachel Reeves said this. Today, in the midst of their cost of living crisis, the Conservatives are scrapping the cap on bankers' bonuses. Tells you everything you need to know about this government. Powerful stuff! But Rachel Reeves has changed her tune. She's now told the BBC that the cap on bankers' bonuses was brought in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, and that was the right thing to do to rebuild the public finances. But that has gone now, and we don't have any intention of bringing that back. As the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I would want to be a champion of the successful and thriving financial services industry in the UK. If you want to be a champion of a successful and thriving financial services, you shouldn't let it be so corrupted by greed and unrestrained speculation, which is obviously reinforced and encouraged by uncapped bonuses. You would actually make sure that it's a regulated industry, or maybe you just want them to further gut this country. Honestly, what is the point? Why do we have a government when the city is right there and clearly pulling the strings? Reeves has not gone unchallenged on this new policy, though. BBC reporter Simon Jack quizzed her on the U-turn after her speech today.
2 days ago, you told us that you had no intention of reinstating a banker's bonus, a cap on bankers' bonuses, and yet 3 months ago you tweeted, today in the midst of the cost of living crisis, the government is scrapping a cap on bankers' bonuses. It tells you everything you need to know about this government. How can the people here trust your pledges when you can change your tune about something you seem to care about so much so quickly?
So when the government scrapped the bank bonus tax, we didn't feel that that was the right priority in that budget. But what I hear loud and clear from business, that what it will take to get them to invest in Britain is stability. And the last thing we need is more chopping and changing. And the truth is that in financial services, there are a lot more rules and regulations and safeguards in place than there were before the financial crisis. So, for example, banks have to put aside much more capital than they did before 2008. And there are much stronger rules about clawing back bankers' bonuses. So we didn't think it was the right priority. It wouldn't have been my number one priority in that budget. But the chopping and changing has got to end if we're going to give stability to business. And that's why we will not be bringing that back.
Do we not need to rebuild the public finances? I don't get it. Why has the situation changed? And how is economic stability achieved via letting a tiny amount of people profit hugely from speculation and wheeler dealing? Because that is what's happening. That's what it is. Is that really the calculation that is driving Rachel Reeves's policy shift? Does she really have a dramatically different understanding of macroeconomics than she did last October? Or, maybe she's just speaking to a different set of people. Economist Richard Murphy posted this list of those advising Reeves on her financial services policy. That's 8 senior executives from commercial investment banks, 1 Bank of England official, and 1 senior regulator. Even Sky's Kay Burley thought Reeves's business pledges smelled a bit funny. This was Burley speaking to Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds earlier today.
To clarify, Labour's happy to cap child benefit but not bankers' bonuses?
Well, I would not make that comparison.
I just did.
The point around this is not about limiting. The bankers' bonus policy was never about how much people are paid. It's the structure. So basically, what was previously bonus went into basic pay. So I just want to be clear, this is not about people saying bankers should earn more. That's not our view.
But you're capping child benefit but not bankers' bonuses. Well, bottom line.
Look, there are lots of things in the social security system I would like to see changed. The health of the economy at the minute isn't one that you can make these kind of pledges on because, frankly, the strain that system is under is too great. What you have to do is what we're doing today, which is how can you grow the British economy? How can you drive up business investment, stronger growth, stronger productivity? How can you make the net zero transition work for working people? All of this requires a strong relationship with the business community.
Okay, but bankers' bonuses, they're not driving productivity. They're driving that little tiny small insular industry in the city. It's not like they're the ones who are funding industry. If they were funding industry, surely then they'd be making more noise about saving the likes of Tata Steel or not going back on the 28 billion they promised for green investment. It doesn't make any sense. Helena, Reeves is trying to woo business, but are Labour cutting off their nose to spite funding the actual policies that the country desperately needs?
I mean, it is really jarring to hear Jonathan Reynolds essentially go, well, we love bringing in business to be able to consult on things we definitely will do for them. But when it comes to policies that are going to help, feeding children, unfortunately, the financial situation is just not good enough for me to make that pledge right now. It's a really interesting, different change in dynamic. I mean, speaking of changes, I've been reading through a lot of Labour campaign materials recently, and they are very clear they continually use the phrase that Labour has changed. And boy, have they changed. Rachel Reeves going today with the line of being both a pro-business and pro-worker seems suspiciously to me like being pro-Turkey and pro-Christmas to me, but nevertheless. What is interesting, though, here is that this isn't being done for votes. Luke Trill, who does focus groups, who was in the segment with Laura Kay on Sunday for the BBC, actually tweeted out a poll done by his organisation recently, showing that one of the least trusted areas of the country that also people view as not respecting them as well is big business specifically, right? They're one of the least trusted people that he had within his group of people used on this poll specifically. So it's not being done to try and pander to voters, which is a different heuristic that we've seen from basically every other position that Labour have taken. They usually just try and change whichever way the wind goes based on what they think will win them votes. But this isn't about votes, because there's no votes to be won in going off to the World Economic Forum and swanning around with the Goldman Sachs bankers at Davos. That's not the way that you win over voters in a post-2008 world when these people are very much untrusted by the public. What this is an attempt to create links with business and Labour. Now, there is part of the business plan they have, which we covered in the Financial Times, I believe it was yesterday. In this creation of what they described as being a growth committee, right? Which sounds suspiciously Trussian to me, which is going to involve business leaders and union leaders apparently as well. So at least some of the people who should have vested interests in Labour are going to be included in that. But it was interesting that all of these links to all these different people from the financial services sector, all these people who are donating to the Labour Party from big business, are suddenly potentially going to be involved in Labour policy making. And we know already that they have very close links to whether Labour are going to be including them in policy making. Tribune did an interesting article recently called Labour for Sale, which way they uncovered a bunch of links between consultancies, between lobbyists, between big business and the Labour Party. Like at the point where we have people who are on Labour's NEC who are directors of lobbying firms. We had Alistair Campbell writing a foreword for Portland Consultancy, in which was informing businesses how they could be interacting with the Labour Party, including ways in which that they could help influence policy. Now, I don't know about you, but a quote-unquote Labour Party run for the trade union movement by the trade union movement shouldn't be allowing business owners who have direct material opposition to the interests of workers in this country be the ones setting policy for them. That doesn't seem like much of a Labour Party to me, although Labour has changed, as they say. So this may well be a new Labour that we're looking for. That's very much feels like the cash for access scandal of 1998 to me, but that is only speculation, nothing specific on that one. But what is interesting, though, is that it's not like they need to do this to get businesses at least informed of what they're doing. During the Corbyn years, John McDonnell was very open that he had taken his plans to businesses and say, this is what we're doing. Not in a, would you like to influence what we're doing, but this is how you can plan, this is how you can know that things will be stable and that we have a plan, without letting them influence how the policy is made. And Matt Saab cousin was tweeting out today that in his time being an advisor, business were interested in knowing what the potential plan for a Corbyn government was. There wasn't this arm's length, we don't want to listen to business at all, but letting them set policy was a Rubicon they weren't willing to cross. There's one last part I'd like to add to this specifically, which is that something that's not been covered very much so in the wake of this business conference is one thing I saw in response to Rachel Reeves speaking with regards to what Jeremy Hunt was doing in his own deregulation of the financial services sector post-Brexit. Now, there's two things. There's what they call the Edinburgh reforms, which is a sense of Brexit bonanza deregulation of the financial sector. What happened last time we deregulated the financial sector? Answers on a postcard. But the second thing was Solvency II, which is something people might not know about in chat. This is a bunch of regulations from the European Union, which involves talking about the risk management of insurance firms within the European Union ecosystem. Now we're outside of the European Union. We're not implicated in Solvency II anymore. But what this does mean is that Jeremy Hunt has decided that he wants to reduce the risk margins on insurance firms, which is the amount of capital that they have to have liquid on hand to be able to deal with if they go bust, reducing the requirements of those by up to 60% in some cases. And Rachel Reeves says she completely backs this. And given that we've just come out of a pandemic and we have plenty of potential ecological disasters coming forward with the wake of climate change, increasing the risk in insurers specifically seems like completely profligate financial policy. And one last closing point. From 1995 to 2020, wages in real terms amongst workers grew 2 times. In the financial sector, they grew 5 times, right? Increasing the financial sector increases the cost of doing business for everybody else in the economy. They benefit at the expense of everybody else. They benefit at the expense of everybody else, not with everybody else, right? This breeds an increase in inequality in this country when you pump up the financial sector in this way. This is not what the Labour Party's values were supposed to be able to prop up, and it's a damning indictment on the current state of the Labour Party that this is what they champion in 2024.